The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered general store, and Samuel Winters could see through the dusty window that the woman inside wasn't moving. Her face pressed against the glass like she'd given up on arrival before even stepping foot in Hamilton, Montana territory. Samuel had been waiting 3 hours in the late afternoon sun of August 1876, his letter folded in his shirt pocket, the one that promised Miss Sarah Wright's safe passage and a new beginning. He'd written honestly about his ranch, about the hard work and the loneliness, about needing a partner who could weather storms both literal and metaphorical. Her responses had been brief but thoughtful, and he'd sensed something fragile in her words, something that made him write more gently than he might have otherwise. The driver climbed down and opened the door. "Madam, we've arrived. Hamilton." She didn't respond. Samuel stepped forward, his boots kicking up the dry Montana dust. "Miss Wright," slowly, her head turned. When he saw her face fully, his breath caught. One eye was swollen nearly shut, purple and yellow bruises decorating her cheekbone. Her lip was split, scabbed over, but still angry red. She looked at him with her one good eye, and in it, he saw something that made his chest tighten, not hope, not relief, but resignation. "I understand if you don't want me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The stage company can take me back east with the next run. I have enough money saved for that, at least." Samuel's jaw worked. He could see other bruises disappearing beneath the high collar of her dress, could see how carefully she held herself, like everything hurt. "Did someone do this to you? Does it matter?" She wouldn't meet his eyes now. "I'm not what you paid for, not what you expected." "I paid for passage, not a person," Samuel said firmly. "And I expected a woman brave enough to travel across the country to start fresh. Looks to me like that's exactly what I'm seeing." She finally looked at him fully, searching his face for mockery or disgust. He kept his expression open, honest. After a long moment she asked, "What's your name?" "You never wrote it in the letters, just S.W. Samuel Winters. And broken things can be mended with patience and care, Miss Wright. If you're willing to try, so am I." Something shifted in her expression, the smallest crack in the wall she'd built around herself. "Sarah," she said. "My name is Sarah," he nodded. "Can you walk, Sarah, or would you like me to carry you to the wagon?" "I can walk." But when she tried to step down from the stagecoach, her leg buckled and she gasped in pain. Samuel caught her before she hit the ground, and she stiffened in his arms like she expected a blow. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you. Not going to hurt you." The driver was already unloading her trunk, a battered thing that looked like it had been kicked down several flights of stairs. Samuel lifted Sarah gently, and she weighed almost nothing, like she'd been forgetting to eat for months. He carried her to his wagon and set her on the seat as carefully as he'd handle a newborn colt. "Doc Miller's office is just down the street," Samuel said. "We should get you looked at." "No." The word came out sharp, frightened. "No doctors, please." "Sarah, I'll be fine. I just need rest." "Time. Please don't make me see a doctor." Her good hand gripped his sleeve, and he could feel her trembling. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. No doctor if you don't want one, but my sister Clara lives on the neighboring property. She's got healing knowledge, learned from the Salish women in the area. Would you let her look at you?" Sarah considered this, then gave a tiny nod. "Maybe. If she's gentle, she is." Samuel loaded her trunk into the wagon bed, then climbed up beside her. The other townspeople were staring, and he could hear the whispers starting already. Hamilton wasn't a large town, barely 300 people, and news traveled faster than wildfire in dry grass. The ride to his ranch took 40 minutes over rough roads. Samuel tried not to jostle her too much, but every bump made her wince. He kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks, telling her about the ranch. Got about 300 head of cattle, he said. Some horses, chickens, obviously, few pigs. The house isn't fancy, but it's solid. Built it myself 4 years ago when I first claimed the land. 2 bedrooms, good fireplace, windows that actually keep the wind out. He paused. You'll have your own room, of course. No expectations, Sarah. You need time, you've got it. She was quiet for so long he thought maybe she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, "Why did you send for a mail-order bride? You seem like the kind of man who could find a wife the normal way." Samuel shrugged. "Tried that. Town's small, and most of the available women are either too young or already spoken for. Besides, I liked writing letters. Felt like I got to know you better that way, without all the usual courting nonsense getting in the way." "You don't know me at all," Sarah said softly. "The woman in those letters, that's not who I am, not really." "Then I'll get to know who you really are," he glanced at her, "if you'll let me." The ranch came into view as they crested a small hill. It was modest but well kept, with a sturdy house painted white, a large barn, several outbuildings and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. The mountains rose behind it all, purple and magnificent in the late afternoon light. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, and Samuel felt an unexpected rush of pride. He pulled the wagon up to the house and came around to help her down. This time she let him lift her without protest. As he carried her up the porch steps, the front door opened and a woman stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Samuel, I saw the dust from the road and thought I'd come over to meet your—" Clara stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she took in Sarah's condition. "Oh, honey." "Clara, this is Sarah Wright. Sarah, my sister Clara Patterson. She lives on the next property with her husband and 2 boys." Clara was already moving forward, her face a mixture of concern and anger. "Who did this to you?" "It doesn't matter now," Sarah said tiredly. "I'm here. That's finished." Clara looked at Samuel, who shook his head slightly. "Not now, later." Clara was smart enough to understand. "Let's get you inside and comfortable." Samuel put her in the good bedroom, the one with the morning light. "That's your old room," Samuel protested. "I was going to put her in the spare. The spare room is dark and depressing. Put her in the good room." Clara's tone brooked no argument. Samuel carried Sarah inside. The house smelled of wood smoke and the lavender Clara insisted on hanging in bundles from the rafters. The good bedroom was indeed nicer than the spare, with a proper bed frame, a quilt Clara had made, and windows that looked out over the pastures toward the mountains. He set Sarah down on the bed, and she immediately tried to sit up straighter. "I don't want to be any trouble." "Too late for that," Samuel said, but his tone was gentle. "You're already trouble, so you might as well be comfortable trouble." The ghost of a smile crossed her face, then winced as it pulled at her split lip. Clara shooed Samuel out and closed the door most of the way. He could hear her low voice asking questions, Sarah's softer responses. He busied himself bringing in Sarah's trunk and unpacking his supplies from town, trying not to listen but unable to help hearing fragments. "Are any ribs broken, do you think?" "Maybe. Hard to tell. Everything hurts." "And the bruises on your arms, those are from hands, aren't they? Someone grabbed you." Silence. "It's all right, honey. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready." When Clara emerged 20 minutes later, her expression was grim. She found Samuel in the kitchen, attempting to start dinner. "She's in bad shape, Sam. Someone beat her severely, and recently too. Some of those bruises are only a few days old. She's got bruised ribs, maybe cracked, and I'm worried about the limp. Could be a twisted knee or ankle, or could be worse." "Did she say who?" Clara shook her head. "She wouldn't talk about it, just kept saying it was over now, that it didn't matter. But Sam, she flinches at every sound. She's terrified." Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "I'll keep her safe here. No one's going to hurt her again." "I know you will." Clara squeezed his arm. But safe isn't the same as healed. That girl's been through something awful and she needs more than just physical healing. She needs to know she can trust again. I'm a rancher, Clara, not a miracle worker. You're a good man with a patient heart, Clara corrected. That's exactly what she needs. Over the next few days, Samuel learned the rhythms of living with someone broken. Sarah barely left the bedroom, and when she did venture out, she moved like a ghost, always keeping walls at her back, startling at sudden movements. He made sure to knock loudly before entering any room, to move slowly and predictably, to keep his voice even and calm. Clara came by every day to change the bandages on Sarah's ribs and bring food. Sarah would eat a little, but not enough, and she rarely spoke beyond polite responses. Samuel went about his ranch work, but found himself constantly aware of her presence in the house, like a wounded bird that might fly away if he made one wrong move. On the fourth evening, he came in from mending fences to find Sarah sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset. It was the first time she'd left the house since arriving. "Evening," he said, settling into the chair beside her but leaving a good distance between them. "Pretty sky tonight." "It's so big here," Sarah said quietly. "The sky, the space. Back east, everything feels close, pressed in. Here it's like you can breathe." "That's what I love most about Montana," Samuel agreed. "Sometimes I ride out to the far pasture just to look at the sky, feel like I'm the only person in the world. Must get lonely. Sometimes. That's why I wrote to the matchmaking service." He paused. "Though I suppose my letters found you at a complicated time." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she said, "I was working as a seamstress in Boston, living in a boarding house. There was a man there, another tenant. He seemed nice at first, polite. Then he started waiting for me, wanting to walk me places, showing up where I worked. I told him I wasn't interested, but he didn't listen." Samuel kept very still, letting her speak. He got angry, said I was leading him on, that I owed him for his attention. Started grabbing me when no one was looking. The landlady didn't believe me, said I was causing trouble. Then one night he broke into my room. Her voice went flat. "I fought him off with a sewing scissors, stabbed him in the arm. He left, but I knew he'd come back. I knew no one would believe me if I went to the police. Men like him, they always win." "Not always," Samuel said quietly. "Enough of the time." She touched her bruised face gently. "He found me the day before I left for Montana, cornered me in an alley behind the boarding house. Said if he couldn't have me, he'd make sure no one else would want me. Beat me until I couldn't stand. I thought he was going to kill me, but some shopkeeper heard the noise and came running. He ran off. And you still got on that stagecoach. What choice did I have? Stay in Boston and wait for him to finish the job." She looked at Samuel directly. "I thought about not getting off in Hamilton. Thought maybe I'd just stay on the stage, go to California or somewhere farther. But I was so tired, and you seemed kind in your letters. I thought maybe, even if you didn't want me after seeing me like this, at least you'd give me a few days to figure out what to do next." Samuel considered his words carefully. "I'm not going to tell you that what happened to you is over, because I know the marks on the outside heal faster than the ones on the inside. And I'm not going to promise that every man is different, because you've got no reason to trust promises from men. But I will tell you this, you're welcome here for as long as you want to stay, whether that's a week or a year or forever. No expectations, no obligations. This can be a home or just a stop on the way to somewhere else. Your choice." Sarah's eye filled with tears and she brushed them away impatiently. "Why would you do that? You sent for a wife, not a broken woman who can't even do basic work around the house yet." "I sent for a partner," Samuel corrected, "and partners help each other. Right now you need help. Later maybe I'll need help, that's how it works." She studied him in the fading light. "You really mean that?" "I do." I don't know if I can ever be what you want me to be. I want you to be whatever you are, Samuel said. Honest truth, Sarah. I was scared when I sent those letters. Thought I might end up with someone mean-spirited or gold-digging or just plain incompatible. Instead, I got someone brave enough to fight back, strong enough to keep going, and smart enough to know when to leave. Those are fine qualities in a partner, even if I can't ever. She trailed off, blushing despite her bruises. Even then, Samuel said firmly, there's more to partnership than physical relations, though I hope someday you'll feel safe enough with me that you'd want that too. But there's no timeline, no pressure. We've got all the time in the world. The tears spilled over then, and Sarah covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Samuel stayed in his chair, giving her space to cry, just keeping her company in the grief. When she finally quieted, he said, I'm going to make some dinner. You interested in eating with me, or would you rather have a tray in your room? I'll eat with you, Sarah said, her voice rough. If that's all right. More than all right. They fell into a routine after that. Sarah slowly began taking on small tasks around the house, though Samuel could tell it cost her. She'd do the breakfast dishes, then need to rest for an hour. She'd fold some laundry, then limp back to her room. He never commented on it, just worked around her limitations and made sure she knew every contribution was appreciated. Clara came by less frequently as Sarah's physical injuries healed, but she and Sarah had formed a friendship. Sometimes Samuel would come in to find them sitting together, Clara teaching Sarah how to make preserves or sharing gossip about the neighbors. Sarah smiled more in Clara's presence, and gradually those smiles began appearing when it was just her and Samuel too. 3 weeks after Sarah's arrival, Samuel came in from the barn to find her in the kitchen, flour dusting her hair and arms, a lopsided cake cooling on the counter. I know it's ugly, she said before he could speak, but I wanted to try. Today's your birthday, isn't it? You mentioned it in one of your letters. Samuel stared at the cake, then at Sarah. You remembered that. I remember everything in your letters. You wrote them like each one mattered. She ducked her head. I saved them all, even brought them with me. Something warm bloomed in Samuel's chest. No one's baked me a birthday cake since my mother died. Well, don't get too excited until you taste it. Baking was never my strong suit. But when they cut into it after dinner, the cake was actually good, sweet, and tender. Sarah beamed at his praise, and Samuel thought it might be the first time he'd seen her genuinely happy since she'd arrived. I've been thinking, Sarah said as they finished their slices, about what comes next. I can't stay here indefinitely without contributing more. I'm healed enough now to do real work. I could earn my keep. You don't need to earn anything. Yes, I do. Her voice was gentle but firm. Not because you're demanding it, but because I need to. I need to feel useful again, like I'm moving forward instead of just hiding. Does that make sense? It did, actually. Samuel nodded. What did you have in mind? I was a good seamstress back in Boston. People here must need clothes mended, dresses made. I could take in sewing work, maybe set up in the spare room, and I've been watching you with the animals. I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania before my parents died. I know my way around chickens and pigs. I could manage the coop and the pig pen, maybe help with the garden. The garden's mostly gone to weeds, Samuel admitted. I can grow food when I put my mind to it, but I don't have much mind left after handling the rest of the ranch. Then that's where I'll start. Sarah stood, gathering their plates. Tomorrow, if the weather holds, I'm going to reclaim that garden. Fair warning, I'm going to make you tell me where things are and help dig the really stubborn weeds. Samuel grinned. Yes, madam. True to her word, Sarah attacked the garden the next day with a determination that bordered on ferocious. Samuel helped when she needed muscle for the big roots, but mostly he watched her work, impressed by her focus. She was still limping, still favoring her left side where the ribs had been hurt worst, but she pushed through. As September arrived and the air turned crisp, Sarah transformed the garden into a proper vegetable patch again. She harvested the last of the late summer produce, started planning for next year's planting, and somehow even got the weeds cleared from around the chicken coop. Word spread through Hamilton that Samuel Winter's mail-order bride was a hard worker and skilled seamstress, and soon people were stopping by with mending or requests for new garments. Sarah set up a proper sewing space in the spare room, and Samuel would hear the whir of her treadle sewing machine at odd hours, her voice humming softly as she worked. She seemed more alive with each passing day, the shadows in her eyes gradually fading. One evening in mid-September, Samuel came in from a difficult day of herding cattle to find Sarah in the kitchen, stirring a pot of stew. She'd pinned her hair up loosely, and the lamplight caught the gold in it. She was wearing a dress she'd made herself, simple but well-fitted, and Samuel was struck by how beautiful she was when she wasn't haunted by fear. "Rough day?" she asked, glancing at his expression. "Lost a cow to a cougar, found the carcass up in the rocks. I'm sorry." She ladled stew into bowls. "Come eat, you'll feel better." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, then Sarah said, "I've been here almost 2 months now." "Has it been that long already?" "You know it has." She set down her spoon. "Samuel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." His stomach tightened. "All right. What do you want from this arrangement, from me?" She held up a hand before he could speak. "I know what you've said about patience and no expectations. And you've been true to your word, which I'm grateful for. But I need to know what you're hoping for eventually. Because I think I'm ready to start trying to figure out what comes next, but I need to know what direction we're heading." Samuel set down his own spoon, choosing his words carefully. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I was hoping for a partner, someone to build a life with. I wanted companionship, someone to talk to at the end of the day. I wanted someone who'd care about this place like I do, who'd put down roots. And yes, eventually I hoped for a wife in all the ways that means. Shared bed, maybe children someday, the whole life together." Sarah nodded slowly. "And now, after seeing me like this, knowing what happened, now I want the same things," Samuel said honestly. "But I want them with you specifically. I've gotten to know you these past weeks, Sarah. The real you, not just the woman in the letters. I've seen your strength, your determination, the way you hum when you're sewing, how you talk to the chickens like they're your friends. I've seen you smile at sunsets and get frustrated with stubborn weeds and work yourself to exhaustion because you're trying to prove something to yourself." He met her eyes. "I want to build that life with you, but only if you want it too, only if you can see a future here." "I can see it," Sarah said softly. "That's what scares me. I can see waking up here every day, working beside you, making this place ours instead of yours. I can see it, but I don't know if I'm capable of all of it. The wife part, I mean. The intimacy." He didn't. She swallowed hard. "He didn't succeed that night, but he did enough. And I don't know if I can ever let someone touch me that way without panicking." "Then we'll figure it out together," Samuel said. "Sarah, there's no rule that says a marriage has to look a certain way. If you need touch to be slow and gradual, we'll go slow. If you need separate rooms forever, we'll have separate rooms. If you need to set boundaries and rules, we'll set them. I care about you. I want you happy and feeling safe. Everything else is negotiable." "You'd really be content with a marriage like that? A wife who might never be able to share your bed?" Samuel thought about it honestly. "I'd be lying if I said physical intimacy wasn't important to me, but you know what's more important? Partnership. Trust. Affection. Those things build the foundation. The rest can come later or not at all, and we'll still have something worth having." Sarah's eyes were wet. "How are you real?" "Pretty sure I'm real. Want to poke me and check?" He was aiming for levity, and it worked. She laughed, a real laugh, and the sound filled something hollow in Samuel's chest. "I'd like to try," Sarah said. "To try building toward a real marriage, but I need to go slow, really slow. We'll go at whatever pace you need. Can we start with something small? Like maybe sitting closer together in the evenings?" Samuel smiled. "I think I can manage that." That night, they sat on the porch together as they often did, but this time Sarah sat close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. It was a small thing, but Samuel could feel the trust it represented, and his heart was full. October brought the first snow to the mountains and a letter that made Sarah go pale. Samuel found her at the kitchen table, shaking, the letter crumpled in her fist. "What's wrong?" "He found me. He knows I'm here." She looked up at Samuel, terror bright in her eyes. "James, the man from Boston. He wrote to me. He must have gotten the address from the matchmaking service somehow. He says he's coming to get me, that I belong to him." Samuel felt a cold fury settle over him. "Let me see the letter." The letter was full of possessive declarations and veiled threats. James insisted that Sarah had made promises to him, that she'd run away out of fear, but that he'd forgive her if she came back. If she didn't return, he'd come to Hamilton and take her back where she belonged. The writing was erratic, obsessive. "He's not getting anywhere near you," Samuel said flatly. "You can't stop him. If he comes here, he'll meet every rancher in the valley who doesn't take kindly to men who beat women." Samuel stood. "I'm going into town to talk to Sheriff Morrison, and I'm sending word to Clara's husband and the other neighbors. We'll make sure everyone knows to keep an eye out for strangers asking after you. What if he hurts someone because of me?" Samuel knelt in front of her chair, taking her cold hands in his. "Listen to me. You are not responsible for his actions. He made choices, bad ones, and those are on him. Not you. Never you." Sheriff Morrison took the threat seriously. He posted a description of James in the sheriff's office and spread word through town to alert him if anyone matching the description showed up. Samuel's neighbors, a tight-knit group of ranchers and homesteaders, promised to keep watch and help if needed. For 2 weeks, every sound made Sarah jump. She stopped sitting on the porch, stayed inside with the doors locked when Samuel was working far from the house. The progress she'd made seemed to evaporate, and Samuel's heart ached watching her retreat back into fear. Then, on a cold morning in late October, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Samuel was in the barn and saw him coming. The man matched James's description, tall and thin with dark hair and an eastern suit ill-suited to Montana weather. Samuel walked out to meet him, his rifle held casually but ready. "Can I help you? I'm looking for Sarah Wright. I was told she lives here." The man's voice was clipped, irritated. "And who's asking?" "James Aldrich. I'm her fiancé." He said it like it was an established fact. "Funny, she's never mentioned you." Samuel kept his voice level. "And I'm her husband, so I think I'd know if she was engaged to someone else." James's face flushed red. "You're lying. She wouldn't marry some backwater cowboy. Got the marriage certificate to prove it." Samuel didn't, but James didn't know that. "Now, I'm going to give you one chance to turn around and leave. After that, things get unpleasant. I have rights." "She made promises." "You have nothing," Samuel cut him off. "You beat her, terrorized her, and drove her across the country to escape you. Those aren't the actions of a fiancé. Those are the actions of a man who deserves a horsewhipping." James reached into his coat, and Samuel had the rifle up and aimed before he could draw whatever weapon he was reaching for. "Don't. You going to shoot me, cowboy?" "If I have to." Samuel's voice was stone cold. but I'd rather not have to explain the mess to the sheriff. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to ride away from here and never come back. You're going to forget Sarah exists. And if you ever try to contact her again, if you ever come within 100 miles of Hamilton, I will find you and make you regret it. Are we clear? She's mine. The sound of a shotgun being cocked cut him off. Sarah stood on the porch, pale but steady, holding Samuel's old shotgun. I'm not yours. I was never yours. You convinced yourself of a fantasy, and when I didn't play along, you tried to beat me into submission. That's over. Sarah, be reasonable. Get off our property. Her voice shook but held firm. Now. James looked between them, calculating. Samuel could see him weighing his options, considering whether he could draw and fire before one of them shot him. Samuel shifted his stance, making it clear he was ready. Finally, James sneered. You can have her. She's not worth the trouble anyway. Frigid little Samuel fired a shot into the dirt near the horse's hooves. The animal spooked, dancing sideways, and James had to fight to keep his seat. Ride away now, or the next one won't be a warning. James got his horse under control and shot one last venomous look at Sarah before wheeling around and galloping down the drive. Samuel kept the rifle trained on him until he was out of sight, then finally lowered it and turned to Sarah. She was shaking so hard the shotgun was wavering. Samuel walked over and gently took it from her hands, then pulled her into his arms. She clung to him, her face pressed against his chest, and he could feel her heart racing. You were so brave, he murmured into her hair. So damn brave. I was terrified. Brave isn't not being scared. Brave is being scared and standing up anyway. You did that. He held her tighter. He's gone, Sarah. He's really gone. What if he comes back? Then we'll deal with it together. Samuel pulled back enough to see her face. But I don't think he will. Men like that are cowards at heart. He won't risk facing armed resistance. Sheriff Morrison came out later that day after Samuel sent word. He took statements from both of them and promised to escort James to the county line and make sure he got on an eastbound stage. Men like that don't take rejection well, the sheriff said. But they also don't like consequences. Doubt he'll trouble you again, but if he does, you send word immediately. That night, Sarah asked if she could sleep in Samuel's room. Not in your bed, she clarified quickly, but maybe just on a pallet on the floor. I don't want to be alone. Samuel made her a comfortable bed on the floor with quilts and pillows, but in the middle of the night he woke to find her standing beside his bed, silhouetted in the moonlight from the window. Sarah. I keep thinking I hear horses. I know it's just my imagination, but I can't settle. She hesitated. Could I lie down beside you, just to sleep? I think I'd feel safer. Of course. Samuel shifted over, making room. Sarah climbed onto the bed, staying on top of the covers while he was under them, maintaining that barrier. But she was close enough that he could hear her breathing, feel the warmth of her presence. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For not making me go back, for protecting me, for being patient. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Yes, I do. Because it's not as common as it should be. She was quiet for a moment. Samuel, I think I'm falling in love with you. I'm not sure because I don't have much to compare it to, but when I think about my future, you're in every version of it. And when James showed up today, my first thought wasn't about being scared for myself. It was being scared that he might hurt you. That feels like love. Samuel's breath caught. I've been in love with you for weeks, he admitted. Maybe since that first night when you cried on the porch and trusted me with your story. Definitely by the time you made me that birthday cake. He felt her turn toward him in the darkness. Can I hold your hand? Samuel found her hand in the space between them and laced his fingers through hers. They fell asleep like that, hands linked, and when Samuel woke in the morning, Sarah was tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. She woke soon after and blushed when she realized where she was. Sorry, I didn't mean to crowd you. I didn't mind. Samuel smiled at her. Actually, I slept better than I have in months. After that night, they fell into a new routine. Sarah slept in Samuel's room, though they maintained the fiction of separate blankets for a while. Small touches became common. A hand on an arm, shoulders brushing, comfortable casual contact that gradually built Sarah's trust that touch didn't always lead to pain. November brought the marriage certificate. Sheriff Morrison had agreed to witness it, along with Clara and her husband Tom. They had a simple ceremony in the ranch house parlor, Samuel in his Sunday suit and Sarah in a dress she'd made from fabric Clara had gifted her, pale blue wool that brought out the color in her eyes. "I know we've done this backward," Samuel said when it was time for vows. "Got to know each other as people before making it official. But Sarah, I promise you a partnership built on respect, a home full of warmth, and all the patience you need for as long as you need it. I promise to protect you, support you, and love you for exactly who you are." Sarah's voice was steady when she replied, "I promise to build this life with you, to work beside you and stand beside you. I promise to trust you with my healing and my heart. I promise to love you, Samuel Winters, for all the days we have together." When the sheriff pronounced them married, Samuel looked at Sarah questioningly. She gave a tiny nod, and he leaned in for the briefest, gentlest kiss, just a brush of lips that still made Sarah blush and smile. They had a small celebration dinner with Clara's family, and when everyone left, Samuel and Sarah stood together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "How does it feel to be officially married?" Samuel asked. "Terrifying and wonderful at the same time," Sarah admitted. "Is that normal?" "I think so. Marriage is a big step. We've already taken bigger steps. This is just the paperwork making it official." She leaned against him and he wrapped an arm around her waist. "Samuel, I'm ready to try being closer. Not everything, not yet, but more than we have been." "What does that look like to you? Maybe we share the same blankets tonight, and you could hold me, properly hold me. I think I'd like that." That night, they lay together under the quilts, Sarah's back to Samuel's chest, his arm around her waist. She tensed initially, then gradually relaxed into his warmth. "This okay?" he murmured. "Better than okay." She laced her fingers through his where they rested on her stomach. "I never thought I'd feel safe like this with anyone. You can always say stop if it becomes too much. I know. That's why I feel safe." Winter settled over Montana with a vengeance. The snow piled high and ranch work became a battle against the cold. Samuel spent long days keeping the cattle fed and the barn secure, while Sarah managed the house and her sewing work. Despite the hardship, there was a coziness to the winter months, coming in from the bitter cold to find the house warm and Sarah cooking dinner, sitting by the fire in the evenings while Sarah sewed and Samuel mended tack. They were partners in truth now, working together to keep the ranch running. Sarah proved to have a head for numbers and took over managing the household accounts. She also started breeding chickens more deliberately, improving the flock's egg production. Her sewing business grew as well, with women from as far as 3 towns over sending requests for her work. By January of 1877, Sarah had been at the ranch for 5 months. One snowy evening after they'd gone to bed, Sarah turned in Samuel's arms to face him instead of lying with her back to him as she usually did. "I want to try more," she said quietly. "I want to try being intimate with you." "Fully intimate?" Samuel's heart rate picked up. "Are you sure? There's no rush, I'm sure. I'm nervous, but I'm sure. I love you and I trust you and I want to be your wife in all the ways that means." She touched his face gently. "Will you be patient with me if I need to stop? Always." It wasn't perfect or smooth that first time. Sarah panicked twice and Samuel stopped immediately both times, holding her and murmuring reassurances until she felt ready to try again. But they worked through it together, and when they finally succeeded, Sarah cried tears of relief and joy. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to do this," she said, lying in Samuel's arms afterward. "I thought he'd broken that part of me forever." "You were never broken," Samuel said firmly. "You were hurt, yes, but not broken. Hurt can heal." "With patience and care," Sarah finished, smiling through her tears. "You were right about that." Their physical relationship deepened after that, but it remained something they approached with care and communication. There were still difficult nights when memories would surface and Sarah would need space. But there were also beautiful nights of connection and intimacy that strengthened their bond. Spring came, and with it, the hard work of calving season and planting. Sarah threw herself into expanding the garden, planning an ambitious layout that would provide vegetables for the house and extra to sell in town. Samuel helped her build proper garden beds and a small greenhouse for starting seedlings. In April, Clara came by for tea and noticed Sarah looking green around the gills. "When was your last monthly?" Clara asked bluntly. Sarah blinked, thought about it, and went pale. Oh my." Samuel came in from the barn to find Sarah and Clara grinning at each other like they were sharing a tremendous secret. "What's going on, Samuel Winters? You're going to be a father," Sarah announced, and Samuel's legs went weak enough that he had to sit down. "A father? Really? You're sure?" "As sure as I can be this early. But yes, I think so." Samuel crossed the room in 3 strides and swept Sarah up in a careful hug, spinning her once before setting her down. "We're having a baby." The pregnancy was rough in the early months. Sarah was sick frequently and exhausted all the time. Samuel took over more of the household work and made sure she rested, though Sarah chafed at the inactivity. By summer, though, she felt better and insisted on returning to her regular activities, modified as needed. They spent the warm months preparing for the baby, setting up the spare room as a nursery, gathering supplies. Clara passed down her boys' old baby clothes and gave Sarah advice. The neighborhood women threw Sarah a small party, bringing gifts and sharing their own experiences of motherhood. In late August, as Sarah's belly grew round and full, Samuel came in one evening to find her standing in the nursery, hands on her lower back, surveying their preparations. "Seems real now, doesn't it?" Samuel said, coming up behind her. "It's terrified me this whole time," Sarah admitted. "The thought of bringing a baby into the world, of being responsible for a whole person. What if I'm not good at it? What if I mess them up somehow? Then we'll figure it out together, same as everything else." Samuel kissed her temple. "You're going to be an amazing mother, Sarah. Look at how you care for everything here, the chickens, the garden, me. You pour love into everything you do. That's different than a baby. Not as different as you think." He turned her to face him. "We're going to make mistakes, all parents do. But we're going to love this child fiercely, and we're going to give them a good home. And that's what matters." The baby came on a warm afternoon in late September, almost exactly 1 year after Sarah had arrived in Hamilton. Clara attended as midwife, and Samuel paced the porch for hours, listening to Sarah's laboring cries and feeling helpless. When Clara finally emerged and said, "Come meet your son," Samuel nearly tripped over his own feet getting inside. Sarah was propped up in bed, exhausted and sweaty and absolutely radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at Samuel with tears in her eyes. "Meet Frederick. I hope you don't mind, I named him while Clara was cleaning him up. Frederick." A name that started with F, following some pattern Sarah must have decided on. Samuel didn't care what the pattern was, only that she'd chosen it. Frederick Winters. It's perfect. The baby was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and a powerful set of lungs. Samuel sat beside Sarah on the bed and touched one small fist with his finger, amazed when Frederick gripped it. "He's strong," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "He'd better be, growing up on a ranch." Sarah leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder. "1 year ago, I stepped off that stagecoach convinced my life was over. Now look at us." "Now look at us," Samuel echoed, wrapping his arm around his wife and son. "A family." Frederick was a demanding baby, waking frequently to eat and fussing when his schedule was disrupted. Sarah was exhausted those first months, and Samuel did everything he could to help, taking night shifts when the baby would accept a bottle, handling all the household chores so Sarah could rest when Frederick slept. But despite the exhaustion, there was profound joy in their home. Samuel would catch Sarah singing to Frederick while she nursed him, or find her just staring at their son with wonder in her eyes. And the first time Frederick smiled, a real smile at about 6 weeks old, both Sarah and Samuel melted completely. The first year of Frederick's life flew by in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. But it was also full of precious moments, first laughs and attempts to crawl, the delight of watching Frederick discover the world. Sarah was a natural mother, patient and loving, though she still had moments of doubt that Samuel always talked her through. Hamilton celebrated its centennial celebration in the summer of 1878 with a town fair. Samuel, Sarah, and 10-month-old Frederick attended, and Sarah was surrounded by women asking after the baby and complimenting her dress work. She'd built a solid reputation as the best seamstress in the county, and her business continued to thrive even with a baby to care for. Samuel watched his wife charming the neighbors, Frederick on her hip, and felt his heart swell with pride and love. She'd come so far from the broken woman on the stagecoach. She was confident now, secure in herself and her place in the community. She laughed easily, smiled often, and the shadows that had haunted her eyes were gone. That night, after Frederick was asleep and they were lying in bed together, Sarah said, "I was thinking about something today at the fair." "What's that?" "How happy I am. How this life we've built is more than I ever dreamed possible." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "When I got on that stagecoach to Montana, I thought I was running away, but I was really running toward something, toward you and this life, even though I didn't know it yet." "I'm glad you got on that stagecoach," Samuel said. "Even though seeing you hurt nearly broke my heart, I'm glad you came here. Broken things can be mended with patience and care," Sarah quoted his words from that first day. "You were right about that. You mended me." "No," Samuel corrected gently. "You mended yourself. I just gave you a safe place to heal. We mended each other then. You were lonely and I was broken, and together we became whole." She kissed him softly. "I love you, Samuel Winters. I love you too, Sarah Winters." The years rolled on, filled with the daily rhythms of ranch life. Frederick grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch and helping his mother in the garden. At 3 years old, he had his father's steady nature and his mother's determination, a combination that promised interesting teenage years. In the spring of 1881, Sarah announced she was pregnant again. This time she wasn't sick at all, and the pregnancy seemed easier despite her chasing after an energetic toddler. Their daughter was born in December, a Christmas baby they named Florence. Florence was different from Frederick from the start, smaller and more delicate, with Sarah's golden hair and Samuel's steady gaze. She was a quiet baby, more content to watch the world than to demand its attention like Frederick had. Sarah doted on her, making tiny dresses and bonnets, while Frederick was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. The ranch continued to prosper. Samuel had expanded the herd and improved the breeding stock, and his cattle were known throughout the territory for their quality. Sarah's sewing business remained steady, though she was more selective about the work she took on with 2 children to care for. The garden produced abundantly, and Sarah had become known for her preserves and pickles, which she sold at the general store in town. They'd built a good life, a rich life. They had struggles, of course, hard winters and difficult seasons, childhood illnesses that scared them and financial tight spots. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. One evening in the summer of 1885, when Frederick was 7 and Florence was 3, Samuel found Sarah on the porch swing he'd built for her 5th anniversary. The children were asleep inside, and the summer evening was soft and perfect. "Room for me?" he asked. Sarah patted the seat beside her. Samuel sat and put his arm around her, and she leaned into him with the comfort of long practice. They swung gently, listening to the crickets and watching the stars come out. "You ever think about that first day?" Sarah asked. "When I arrived, sometimes, feels like a lifetime ago." "In some ways it was. I was a different person then." She turned to look at him. "Do you ever regret it, taking a chance on a broken woman you'd never met?" "Never once." Samuel kissed her forehead. "Best decision I ever made was standing in front of that stagecoach and offering you patience and care. You've given me everything I ever wanted and more than I knew to dream of." "We've given each other that," Sarah corrected. She rested her hand on his chest over his heart. "I think about the woman I was, stepping off that stage terrified and hurting. If I could go back and talk to her, I'd tell her that she's about to meet the man who'll change everything. That she's going to have a home and a family and happiness beyond measure. That broken things really can be mended." "What would you tell her about the mending process?" Sarah smiled. "That it's not quick or easy, but it's worth it. That patience and care work miracles. And that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." Frederick called from inside. "Mama, Florence is awake and wants you." Sarah sighed but smiled. "Duty calls. I'll get her. You sit and enjoy the evening." Samuel stood and headed inside. He found Florence standing in her crib, arms reaching up. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Papa." Samuel lifted his daughter and settled her on his hip. "What are you doing awake, little miss?" wanted Mama. "Mama's resting." "How about Papa reads you a story instead?" Florence considered this, then nodded solemnly. Samuel grabbed a storybook and carried her to the rocking chair Clara had given them when Frederick was born. As he read, Frederick appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Can I listen too?" "Come on, then." Frederick climbed into the chair with them, squeezing in beside his sister. Samuel adjusted to fit both children and continued reading. By the time he finished the story, both children were drowsy. He carried Florence back to her crib and tucked Frederick into his bed. When he returned to the porch, Sarah was standing at the railing, looking out over the ranch. Samuel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Our life is good," Sarah said softly. "I'm so grateful for all of it." "Me too," Samuel agreed. They stood there together as the last light faded from the sky and the stars grew bright overhead. Two people who'd found each other across a continent, who'd built a life from broken pieces and patience and care. Behind them, in the house they'd made a home, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch sprawled, the fruit of years of hard work and partnership. Sarah turned in Samuel's arms and kissed him, a kiss full of love and promise and contentment. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing past the broken parts to what I could become." "Thank you for being brave enough to step off that stagecoach," Samuel replied. "For trusting me when you had no reason to trust anyone, for building this life with me." As they stood there together under the Montana stars, both of them thought about that day 9 years ago, when a broken woman had arrived in Hamilton, and a patient cowboy had offered her a chance to heal. Neither could have imagined then how their story would unfold, how much love and joy and family would grow from that first tentative meeting. But here they were, living proof that the best love stories aren't the easy ones. They're the ones that require patience and care, trust and time. Two people willing to meet each other in their brokenness and build something beautiful together. The years continued to pass in Hamilton, each one adding new memories to the foundation Sarah and Samuel had built. Frederick grew tall and serious, showing his father's steadiness and his mother's careful attention to detail. By the time he was 10, he could manage the cattle as well as most grown men, and he'd inherited Samuel's love for the land. Florence remained small and delicate, but she had a spine of steel beneath her quiet exterior. She was the one who would stand up to bullies at school, who would nurse injured animals back to health with fierce determination, who inherited her mother's skill with a needle and her father's patience. In 1888, Sarah surprised them all by announcing another pregnancy at 31 years old. Frederick was 11 and Florence was 7, and both children were excited about the prospect of a new sibling. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, though, and Samuel worried constantly. "I'm fine," Sarah kept insisting, but Samuel could see the exhaustion in her face, the way she moved more slowly than usual. "You don't have to be fine all the time," Samuel told her one evening. "Let me take care of you the way you've always taken care of all of us." So Sarah let him, and it was a sweet reversal of those early days when Samuel had patiently helped her heal. Now he was the one making sure she rested, taking over her chores, bringing her tea and making her put her feet up. The children helped too, Frederick managing more of the ranch work and Florence taking over her mother's garden with surprising skill. Their second son was born in February of 1889, in the middle of a snowstorm that had Samuel frantically grateful they'd convinced the doctor to stay at the ranch until the baby came. They named him Francis, keeping with the F-name tradition that Sarah had started with Frederick. Francis was a surprise in every way. Where Frederick had been quiet and serious even as a baby, Francis was loud and demanding and full of energy from the moment he entered the world. He kept them all on their toes, a whirlwind of activity and mischief. But he was also affectionate and funny, filling the house with laughter. "This one's going to give us gray hair," Sarah said one afternoon when Francis was 2, watching him climb on furniture he'd been told repeatedly to stay off of. "Worth it," Samuel replied, scooping up his son before he could fall. "Every gray hair worth it." Life settled into new rhythms. Frederick, now a teenager, took on more responsibility for the ranch. He was talking about maybe studying agriculture at the new land-grant college that had been established, wanting to bring modern techniques back to improve the family ranch. Samuel was proud of his son's ambition and determination. Florence, at 12, had decided she wanted to be a teacher. She tutored younger children after school and had a natural gift for explaining things patiently until they understood. Sarah worked with her on this, recognizing the same careful patience she'd developed in herself. Francis, at 4 years old, was still the wild card, the one who kept everyone guessing. But even his wildness came from a place of joy and curiosity about the world, and Samuel and Sarah had learned to channel it rather than suppress it. In the summer of 1893, Hamilton celebrated its 15th anniversary of incorporation as a proper town. The population had grown to over 1,000 people, and the town had proper streets, multiple churches, a school, and a new library. Sarah had been instrumental in establishing the library, donating money and organizing fundraising efforts. At the celebration, Samuel watched Sarah surrounded by friends, truly part of the community in a way that would have seemed impossible that first day she'd arrived. She wore a dress she'd made herself, beautiful and stylish, and she moved through the crowd with confidence and warmth. She caught him watching and smiled, and Samuel's heart did the same flip it had been doing for 17 years. That night, after the children were asleep and they were alone in their room, Sarah came to Samuel and wrapped her arms around him. "I was remembering today," she said. 17 years ago, I was sure my life was ending. I'd been beaten, terrorized, and I was running with no real hope of anything better. And now look at where we are. "Look at where you've brought us," Samuel corrected. "Your strength, your determination to heal, that's what made all this possible." "Our strength," Sarah said, "together. You gave me the space to heal, and I gave you the partnership you needed. We built this together, Samuel. This family, this life, this love. It's ours, created together." Samuel kissed her deeply, and after all these years, the passion between them hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, built on a foundation of trust and friendship and genuine partnership. They made love that night with the tenderness and familiarity of long practice, and afterwards they lay tangled together, comfortable in each other's arms. "You think we're done?" Sarah asked. "Having children, I mean," Samuel chuckled. "I think 3 is a good number. Why are you thinking about more?" "No," Sarah said. "I love our 3, and honestly, I don't think I could handle another pregnancy. I'm just thinking about how our family is complete now. How everything feels settled and right." "It does," Samuel agreed, "though I suspect with Francis around, settled might be a relative term." Sarah laughed. "True. That boy is going to keep us young whether we like it or not." The turn of the century approached, and with it came changes. Frederick did go to college, studying modern agricultural techniques, and coming home with ideas for crop rotation and new breeding programs. Samuel listened carefully to his son's enthusiasm and implemented some of the ideas, pleased to see them work. The ranch prospered even more, and by 1900 they were one of the most successful operations in the valley. Florence became a teacher just as she'd dreamed, taking a position at the Hamilton School where she'd once been a student. She was beloved by her students and respected by the community. At 20, she was being courted by several young men, but she was taking her time, not rushing into anything. Samuel appreciated that, knowing his daughter had learned from watching her parents' relationship what real partnership looked like. Francis, at 11, was still wild energy barely contained, but he'd found an outlet in horses. He had a gift for working with the animals, a natural horseman who could calm even the most difficult mounts. Samuel started letting him help with training the ranch horses, and Francis bloomed under the responsibility. One evening in 1901, as Samuel and Sarah sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they'd maintained for over 20 years, Sarah said, "We should take a trip." "A trip where?" "I don't know. Maybe back east, show the children where I came from, or maybe just to see the country. Francis will be starting real ranch work soon, and before we know it, he'll be grown and starting his own life. We should take time now while we can to just be together." Samuel considered it. The ranch was running smoothly with Frederick managing much of the daily operations. They could afford to step away for a few weeks. "Where would you want to go?" "California," Sarah said decisively. "I want to see the Pacific Ocean. I want to stand at the edge of the continent and look back at how far we've come, both literally and figuratively." So in the summer of 1902, they took a family trip to California. They traveled by train, a luxury that still amazed Sarah after all her years in Montana. The journey took them through spectacular country, mountains and deserts, and finally the lush California coast. When they reached the ocean, all 5 of them stood on the beach, overwhelmed by the vastness of the water. Francis immediately wanted to go swimming, and while Samuel supervised him in the waves, Sarah stood with Frederick and Florence, the wind whipping her hair. "It's so big," Florence said. "I never imagined." "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" Frederick added. "It makes me feel lucky," Sarah said. "That in this huge world, I found exactly where I was meant to be, who I was meant to be with." They spent 2 weeks in California before heading home, and the trip became one of their family's treasured memories. But as beautiful as California was, Montana pulled at all of them. When they finally returned to the ranch, Samuel and Sarah both felt the rightness of being home. Frederick married in 1904 to a smart young woman named Emma who'd grown up on a neighboring ranch. They built a house on the far corner of Samuel and Sarah's property, close enough to help with the ranch but far enough for independence. A year later, Sarah and Samuel became grandparents when Emma gave birth to a daughter. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Samuel was overcome with emotion. "Our family keeps growing," he said to Sarah later. "Look at what we started, just the two of us taking a chance on each other." "Best chance I ever took," Sarah replied, cuddling the baby. Florence married in 1906 to a lawyer who'd moved to Hamilton from Helena. She continued teaching even after marriage, and her husband supported her in that, which made Samuel and Sarah approve of him even more. They settled in town but visited the ranch often. Francis, at 18, announced he wanted to try working on other ranches before settling at home. "I need to see how other places do things, learn different techniques," he explained. "I'll come back, I promise, but I need to see more of the world first." Samuel understood, even though it hurt a little to see his youngest preparing to leave. "You've always needed to run," he told Francis the night before he left. "Just make sure you know where home is when you're ready to stop running." "I'll always know where home is," Francis promised. Right here. In 1908, Samuel turned 55 and Sarah turned 51. They'd been married over 21 years, together for over 31 years if you counted from the day she'd arrived in Hamilton. Their hair was streaked with gray now, and Samuel's joints ached on cold mornings. But they were still healthy, still active, still deeply in love. One evening they rode out together to the far pasture, something they did less often now but still treasured. They sat on their horses, looking over the ranch spread before them, the mountains rising behind. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Not the marriage, but the way it started. Taking on someone so broken, having to be so patient." Samuel looked at her, this woman who'd become the center of his world. "Not for a single second. Sarah, you were never broken, not really. You were hurt, yes, and healing took time. But you were always strong, always determined. I didn't fix you. You fixed yourself, and I was privileged to witness it." "We fixed each other," Sarah said. "You were lonely and I was scared, and together we became whole. That's what partnership is, isn't it? Each person filling in the gaps the other has, becoming stronger together than either could be alone." "That's exactly what it is." They rode back to the house as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. When they reached the barn, Samuel helped Sarah down from her horse and she kissed him, a kiss full of decades of love and trust. "I love you, Samuel Winters," she said, "today and always." "I love you too, Sarah Winters, today and always." Francis returned home in 1910, having worked on ranches from Texas to Oregon. He'd learned a tremendous amount and was full of ideas for modernizing their operation. He settled back into ranch life seamlessly, working alongside his father and brother, and Samuel began teaching him the business side of the ranch, preparing to eventually hand over more responsibility. The years of their 60s passed in a comfortable rhythm. They watched their grandchildren grow, now numbering 5 with Frederick and Emma having 3 children and Florence having 2. They celebrated holidays surrounded by family, the house full of noise and laughter. They worked side by side on the ranch, their partnership as strong as ever. In 1915, Sarah and Samuel celebrated their 38th year together and their 28th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered for a party, 3 generations of winters filling the ranch house and spilling out onto the grounds. Frederick stood up to make a toast. To my parents, who showed all of us what real love looks like, what real partnership means. Mom, you came here broken and afraid, and Dad, you took a chance on a stranger. Together you built not just a ranch but a family, a legacy. You taught us that patience and care can mend anything, that trust is earned day by day, that love isn't just a feeling but a choice you make every single day. Thank you for showing us how it's done. Everyone raised their glasses, and Sarah had tears streaming down her face. Samuel put his arm around her, and she leaned into him the way she'd been doing for nearly 4 decades. Later, after everyone had gone home and it was just the 2 of them again, they sat on their porch swing, watching the stars come out. Sarah's head was on Samuel's shoulder, his arm around her waist, their bodies fitted together with the ease of long familiarity. "We did good, didn't we?" Sarah said softly. "We did real good. I think about that woman on the stage coach sometimes. The one who was so scared and hurt she could barely function. If I could tell her what was coming, all the love and family and happiness, I don't think she'd believe me." "Would you change anything?" Samuel asked. "If you could go back," Sarah thought about it. "I'd spare myself the pain of what happened in Boston. But I wouldn't change coming here, wouldn't change meeting you, wouldn't change a single day of the life we've built together. The hard beginning makes me appreciate what we have even more." "Broken things can be mended with patience and care," Samuel said, echoing his words from that first day. "They can," Sarah agreed. "And sometimes they become even more beautiful in the mending. All those cracks get filled with love and trust and time, and what emerges is stronger than the original." They sat in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built a life that exceeded anything either of them had dreamed possible. The ranch stretched out around them, their children and grandchildren sleeping in houses scattered across the property, the legacy they'd created together. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Sarah aged gracefully together, their love deepening with each passing season. They handed over more ranch responsibilities to their sons, though they never fully retired, always needing to stay involved in some way. They took joy in watching their grandchildren grow, passing on their values and stories, making sure the next generation understood where they'd come from. In 1920, as they celebrated their 43rd year together and their 33rd wedding anniversary, surrounded once again by their growing family, Sarah stood up to speak. "I've spent 43 years being grateful I got on that stage coach," she said, her voice still strong despite her 73 years. "Grateful that when I arrived broken and scared, Samuel chose patience and care instead of rejection. He taught me that love isn't just passion and romance. It's showing up every day. It's choosing partnership in the hard moments. It's creating space for healing. Our life together has been the greatest gift I could have imagined, and I'm thankful for every single day of it." Samuel stood and kissed her gently, and their family erupted in applause. As he looked around at all the faces, his children and their spouses, his grandchildren, the ranch hands who'd become like family, Samuel felt the satisfaction of a life well lived. That night, as they prepared for bed in the house they'd shared for over 4 decades, Sarah said, "I'm tired, Samuel. The good kind of tired, the kind that comes from a full life, but tired nonetheless. "I know," Samuel said. "I am too. No regrets, not a single one." They climbed into bed together, and Sarah curled into Samuel's arms the way she'd been doing since she'd first learned to trust his touch. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing past the broken exterior to the woman I could become, for giving me time and space to heal, for loving me so well." "Thank you," Samuel replied, "for being brave enough to try again after everything you'd been through, for building this life with me, for being the best partner I could have asked for." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who'd found their perfect match despite the odds. And if you'd asked either of them what the secret to their happiness was, they would have given the same answer: patience, care, trust, and time. The willingness to meet each other where they were, to grow together, to choose love every single day. The Montana sky stretched vast and star-filled above their ranch, just as it had that first night Sarah arrived. But where that night had been filled with fear and uncertainty, now there was only peace and contentment. Two people who'd started as strangers, one broken and one lonely, had become partners, lovers, best friends, and soulmates. Their love story wasn't the easiest or the simplest. It had required patience and care, and no small amount of courage from both of them. But it was real and deep and true, a testament to the power of choosing love even in the face of fear, of taking chances on each other, of believing that broken things really can be mended with patience and care. And in the end, they had built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone, living on in the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward, in the ranch that bore their stamp, in the love story that would be told and retold as an example of what's possible when two people commit to building a life together, one day at a time, with patience and care and endless love.